Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first Google Hangout. Thank you all for watching. Pardon me for my lack of eye contact and things. I have some notes that I'm going to be reading from. All right, so I'd like to start off this Hangout with a couple of reminders. So the ID verification deadline is this Friday, March 23rd at 7:59 UTC. So you do need to ID verify to be eligible for a certificate or for ASU credit. If you're interested in getting the credit, you also need to take the midterm and final exams as proctored exams. And in these half semester classes, things come up really fast. So the midterm opens on Monday, April 2nd, which is actually less than 2 weeks from now. So if you are planning on taking the class for credit, please make sure that you've taken the practice proctoring exam pretty soon, well before that date, just to make sure that you don't have any problems the day of. All graded assignments, so the interactives, quizzes, case studies, this little Sorego activities from both weeks 1 and 2 are due on March 26th at 6:59 UTC. So both of them are due at the same time. From now on, you'll have 1 week to complete all assignments. Please continue to participate on the reflection boards. Share your thoughts and your experiences. Interact with each other. It really helps improve your experience with the class. I think people get a lot out of talking to one another. Many of you may have interests in wellness topics that go beyond the scope of this course. It's a pretty basic 100 level class. I'll discuss a couple of topics today that people have asked about. But there's also an additional resources tab that's on the top of when you're in the course, it's on the top of the screen across there. And it lists several excellent resources for evidence-based information. And so sometimes I know trying to search on the internet, it's hard to find sources that are reputable. And so all of these sources will give you really good information on a wide range of wellness topics. Okay, so the first topic that I'd like to discuss is just a general approach to behavior change that I found to be helpful. So I took a class in grad school that I thought was really helpful in trying to create behavior change in my approach that I take to behavior change. In my job at WIC, not anymore, but I used to counsel clients, and I took a lot of those things that I learned from that class and applied them in this setting, and it was really helpful. So basically what this involves is treating behavior change like a series of self-experiments. So first you decide on a topic that you'd like to address, like your diet. And then you make a lot of observations on yourself. Just pay attention to when you are eating well, when you're not eating well. Are you stressed? Are you bored when you're making less healthy choices? What's available to eat in your house? What times of the day do you eat? Things like that. Just all the little factors that go around whatever this behavior is that you'd like to change. So after gathering all of that initial information, you're going to choose a specific behavior from the broader topic that you'd like to address. So again, for instance, if we're looking at diet, let's say after looking at all of those things, what you decided to focus on was snacks. So all of your meals tend to be pretty healthy, but when you're at school, you choose less healthy options. So from there, you're going to make a hypothesis of what might be effective. So in our example, it could be prepping the night before and bringing healthy snacks with you to school so that you're not just buying whatever's in the vending machines. After that, you're going to evaluate your hypothesis. So did preparing the snacks actually help you make a healthy behavior change? Did you even prepare the snacks, or is there some other barrier that you need to address first? Let's say you said that you're going to prepare the snacks before you go to school, but you always wake up with no time to spare, so you really weren't doing it at all. Do you have the snacks, but you're so hungry that you don't want your carrot sticks and almonds? You want something a little bit more substantial than that. So, just taking the time to see, is what you hypothesized, is that a good approach for you? Did it work? So from there, what you're going to do is either make another hypothesis or and then test it, or continue to evaluate your first approach for behavior change to make sure that it continues working, if it is working. So in our example, let's say that that last situation that I mentioned was true. So you just don't want your carrot sticks and almonds. So they end up just sitting in your backpack. You never eat them because you skip breakfast and you're starving, and that just doesn't sound good to you. So what you'll do is make a new hypothesis about what's going to help. And so you're going to now not skip breakfast. So you're going to prepare a healthy breakfast for the week on Sunday. Okay, so then you're going to go through that whole process again of seeing if that works. Or if making the snacks is working and you're feeling better, you may want to kind of keep an eye on that behavior to make sure that it becomes a habit. Because at some point in time, you know, things in your life change. Maybe you'll get tired of those snacks and you won't do it anymore, or your classes will change, or you'll pick up a job, and for whatever reason, prepping those snacks isn't really helping anymore. And so just making sure that you keep doing it. It can be a particular issue that falling off of the effectiveness of approaches, especially when you're talking about reminders. So if your approach to changing your behaviors is setting a reminder in your phone to do something like to meditate at 6 in the morning or something like that, you know, oftentimes those reminders are effective at first, but then we sort of stop seeing them. And this may not be a problem. So say you had those reminders on and you're doing it every single day, and now it's just a habit and you don't even really need a reminder, then that's great. But it can also be that you still need that reminder, but now you're just completely ignoring it. Like my office at work is completely covered in Post-it notes, and half of them I don't even see anymore. And so I have to go through periodically and clear them out because they're not working. So again, it's that whole process of choosing a topic, making a hypothesis, testing it, retesting it. So it's an ongoing iterative process. It's not like a one and done deal. And what I really like about it is I think it's a really positive approach. You know, you're not trying to make all of your changes at once. You're focusing on one thing and you're paying a lot of attention to it. And I think that that can be really helpful is, you know, not to just focus on this one thing, oh, I need to make my diet better, but to really evaluate it and look at what's keeping you from not eating better, like getting at that real root cause. I think it's also really positive because there really are no failures. You know, I think a lot of people, when they want to lose weight or make other kinds of changes, kind of bite off more than they can chew. And then, you know, if you've decided you're only going to eat 1,200 calories a day and you have this really strict regimen, and then one day you eat this huge piece of cake, sometimes that can be really discouraging. And people are like, well, you know, I failed. Oh, well, you know, might as well quit. Or like they just feel really bad about themselves, and then trying to get back on track is a lot harder. And so this is just taking a very positive approach. You know, nothing is a failure. It's all a part of the process. And I think it really helps. And so if any of you guys are considering making serious changes, and based on the discussion board, a lot of you are, that's probably why a lot of you are in this class, I would really encourage you to take that kind of approach with yourself. So talking about some of the things that have been posted on the discussion board, I did get a question on the best approaches to dealing with getting cravings throughout the day. And so again, I would really encourage you to take this approach because it is so individualized as well as being positive. Everyone has different barriers and facilitators to change. Sometimes it can be really hard to offer advice if you don't know people's backgrounds and what's going on in their lives. And that's really only something that you can do. So, you know, again, just take that experimental approach. But if you want a place to start, so with cravings, like with other diet-related issues, you know, you want to take a look at things like the time between your meals, you know, what you're eating, what your emotional state is when you're making those choices, things like that, because those all sort of play together into what you generally eat. Is, you know, how prepared are you, how hungry are you, and what do you feel like? Because a lot of us do eat out of emotions. You know, a lot of us eat out of habit and a lot of other things. So, but these are just a few things to look at. You know, especially when you're talking about cravings, and we're talking about what you're eating, to get and to stay full longer, it's a good idea to try to have a high carbohydrate food with a good source of protein. So like peanut butter toast, cheese and crackers, something like that. So the, you know, the carbs are processed a little bit more quickly by your body, especially if they're those refined carbohydrates like white bread, rice, potatoes, that are digested very quickly. You get this big rush of sugar into your bloodstream, and then it goes away, and then you're hungry again. And so having it with some protein really helps you to stay full a little bit longer, and that can curb a lot of cravings that that you may have just because you're too hungry. Or, you know, when, at least I find in particular that if I eat a lot of sugar, then, you know, you get that big rush and then you're hungry again. And a lot of times if I make a bad choice in the morning, if I have a donut for breakfast and that's it, then I'm going to want to eat junk all throughout the day. And I think it's just that process of getting those huge spikes in your blood glucose level, and then you get really hungry, and then you end up making poor choices. And so that's just a little tip, is maybe try to do that. Just try to make your snacks balanced and make your meals balanced. If you have whole grains instead of refined grains, that's of course much better. So whole grains like brown rice, whole wheat bread or crackers, corn tortillas, things like that, they include the whole part of that seed that the grains are from, or what they are, I guess. So the germ and all the other little parts that I'm now totally blanking on. But so it includes protein, fat, and fiber, as well as the straight carbohydrate. So that is going to provide you with additional nutrients, obviously. And then also it helps slow your digestion a little bit. And so those, you don't get quite that same quick rush of carbohydrates into your bloodstream. Things, you know, you get a slower release of energy, which can also help with curbing cravings and with staying full with healthier choices. All right, so that pretty much covers what I would want to talk about with dealing with cravings. So I also had a couple of questions on there about diets, what foods are best to eat for specific situations, and how to get the most out of what you eat. So I'll just go into that a little bit. First, I'd like to talk about the typical American or Western diet. So Americans on average consume too much protein, so things like meat, eggs, nuts, and grains, and not enough fruits, vegetables, and low-fat dairy, which is a little debatable. But and then also for added sugar recommendations, so not the sugar that's naturally found in fruit, dairy, and grains, is only about 6 to 9 teaspoons, which people often exceed without even realizing it. So for example, there are 2.5 tablespoons of sugar in one 12-ounce can of Coke. So, you know, you're already at your limit if you just have one Coke and not eating anything else. And so, yep, so not enough fruits, vegetables, probably too much protein and grains, and definitely too much sugar is what characterizes a typical Western diet. So for general health, for your average person out there, the best option for most people is just to align your diet more closely to diet recommendations. You know, here in the US, we generally look at the choosemyplate.gov website. Those are our government recommendations for health. You know, they do translate across other cultures. I know there's many of you out there that are from around the world, but it is, you know, somewhat focused on foods that Americans typically eat, but you can translate that into your own context. The Harvard Food Pyramid and the DASH diet are also really good plans. Vegetables and less salt. They're more aligned with the current state of nutrition research. Although again, like the USDA recommendations are great, the Harvard and the DASH diets are just, it's a little bit more strict. If that's something that you're interested in doing, they're really great diets to follow. So usually that's enough, just eating these balanced diets and following those recommendations. So this kind of leads into another question that was on the discussion board, which was the best free or inexpensive online tools for health and wellness. And so going back to the USDA recommendations, if you go onto the website, which is choosemyplate.gov, there's a super tracker function on there. And so in the super tracker function, you can, you enter in some information about yourself. You can track everything that you eat throughout the day. And you can also put in your physical activity levels, which is helpful. I really like Super Tracker because it provides servings of food per food group versus just like eating this many calories or things in grams. I personally just have an easier time understanding what a serving is than trying to put things into grams. So it's kind of personal preference for you. But, for me, when I look at my printout on the Super Tracker, there's like a little chart across the top. And, it says 2 servings of fruit, 3 servings of vegetables. I think mine is 4 or 5 servings of grains, 2 servings of protein. And so if you have a good idea of what a serving is, it makes it really easy. So that 1 slice of bread is about 1 serving of grain, about 1/3 of a cup of rice, or half a cup of rice, about a cup of fresh cut up vegetables. Will meet that recommendation. And, if you just kind of spend a little bit more time on that website too, and try to gauge about what it is, then when you look at your plate, you can count up how many servings you're having per meal. And as long as you're making healthier choices, out of all the options that are available, so more of the whole grains versus the refined grains, if you're eating vegetables, without a lot of added fats, leaner cuts of meat, things like that, then you're already doing pretty well. And these are just kind of general, simple for everyone sort of tips. I find the Super Tracker really easy to use. MyFitnessPal also allows you to put in your diet as well as your exercise. I really like this one. It's it's an app, so you can scan barcodes of things that you're eating too, like if you have crackers or other processed foods, which is really nice. And I think they actually have that now too on the new Super Tracker app, which is My Plate Tracker. But there are a ton of other diet and other trackers out there. I just haven't used all of them. These are the 2 that I've personally used most, that and then also the Fitbit one. You do obviously have to buy a Fitbit to be able to use the app effectively, but it has options on there for you to track your diet. You can also track your water intake. You can track your sleep. It has a lot of good options on there if you do have a Fitbit. So then there seems to be a lot of really useful physical activity apps out there, some of which I've used that are great. One it's called C2 5K, Couch to 5K. I personally am not a big runner. I don't love it, but I've used this app a couple of times, and it really is motivating, and it gets you from doing nothing at all, sitting on the couch, to running a 5K in I think it's a month. But it's a great app, just to get you started on a fitness plan. One that my sisters got me really into was the Charity Miles Tracker. And so this is somewhat like a walkathon kind of concept. So you just have this app running while you're walking, biking, doing whatever. And then however many miles you do, money gets donated to particular charities. So it's kind of, again, like a walkathon sort of concept. And yeah, so it's fun, and it feels like you're doing it for a good reason. I also use a couple of meditation apps, or I have in the past. The one I'm using right now is called Insight Timer. So I find it really helpful to have either guided meditations or to have an official timer. You can set reminders. Again, we know that there's potential problems with reminders, but it can be helpful. I really like the app. I think it's really useful. So meditation apps are something to consider. There's a lot of sleep apps out there. So again, if you have Fitbit, that'll track your sleep. There's the other sleep one that I saw come up a lot was called Sleep Cycles. Of the other ones, they'll track like how much you're moving during your sleep and things like that to see how restful your sleep was. So those can be really useful if that's a problem that you have. I also consider it to be a wellness app, apps that do things like lock your phone and help you focus. So I have an app called Quality Time. And so I'll set that during certain periods of times that I can't get any phone calls or texts so that I can really focus at work. I think focus is part of mental health, not having quite so many distractions. So I would consider that to be a wellness app as well. I would encourage you guys on the discussion board, if you want to share other things that have worked for you. I've only tried so many of these apps or heard about so many of these apps, but, give them a try. A lot of them can be really motivating, especially ones like, I think MyFitnessPal has this too, but definitely Fitbit has challenges. So, if you have multiple friends that are on the same app and you can see who's doing their 10,000 steps a day or whatever you set as your challenge, it can be really motivating, it can be really great. So please do check out these apps and share them with each other. So the next topic I have was a question on food pairing, or about like how to get the most out of your foods. So some nutrients use the same receptors in your stomach for absorption, or when they're combined with one another, it actually decreases your level of absorption of nutrients. So this is one reason why it's generally recommended that people take a multivitamin versus individual vitamins. If you take a single nutrient vitamin, then you could be inadvertently creating deficiencies in other vitamins or other nutrients. So it's just good to be careful with that. A lot of stuff with food is balance. So this effect is less prominent when you're just talking about foods, but it definitely still exists in a couple of areas in particular. So just to give you a couple of examples, if you take high doses of zinc, that can lead to a copper deficiency, because what you'll be doing is overloading your receptors with zinc, and then copper can't fight it out and get in there. So that's one to consider. There are a lot of these. You can Google them if you're curious about one thing or another, like if you happen to be taking a single nutrient vitamin for whatever reason. At WIC, we end up talking a lot about iron. At WIC, we serve women, infants, and children. Anemia is a fairly common issue that we deal with, and we do screen for it there. So we do catch people when they do have low levels of iron. So usually when people come in with low levels of iron, we'll suggest eating foods that are high in iron. So things like, meat, eggs, chicken, beans, dark leafy greens, with foods that are high in vitamin C, like fruits and vegetables. Vitamin C actually helps you better absorb the iron. So eating those foods together can be helpful, can help you get a little bit more of that iron out of your foods. So on the flip side, we also recommend separating dairy foods from foods that are really high in iron. So calcium works in the opposite way. It's antagonistic. And so when you eat foods that are high in calcium, the calcium actually binds the iron, and then you end up just excreting it. So you don't get all that iron that you could out of your foods. And so if people have problems with that, then we do recommend that they separate calcium from iron, combine iron and vitamin C. Another thing to consider is that some nutrients are more or less bioavailable, which means like readily used by the body when cooked or when eaten with a fat source. And so this mostly refers to fat-soluble vitamins, and those ones are A, D, E, and K. But it also applies to some minerals, like protein is more easily digestible if it's cooked. Fiber, zinc, thiamine, calcium, and iron are all, generally speaking, more bioavailable if the foods are cooked. Vitamin C and the B vitamins are destroyed very easily by heat. And so if you cook foods that are high in vitamin C, then that may decrease your levels of vitamin C or B vitamins or whatever a bit. Again, cooking breaks down those tough fibers in vegetables and grains, making them more digestible. You know, it helps make the proteins in meat a little bit easier to digest. You know, you also want to cook your meat, obviously, because there's a certain amount of risk associated with that as far as foodborne illnesses, especially ground meats. So it's generally a good idea. And it would be really hard to get everything you need with raw foods alone. I know some people think that eating raw foods is healthier and that they're getting more out of their foods, but that's not necessarily always the case. So again, like with most things, the best option is for people to get a balance. So eating a variety of fruits and vegetables that are both cooked and uncooked, as well as a variety of foods from every food group, will help you get all the nutrients that you need. If you want to take supplements, I would recommend just taking a multivitamin unless you're otherwise instructed by a health professional, because you have some other very specific needs. Taking large amounts of a single nutrient can be dangerous. So like we talked about, there can be those interactions between nutrients. There can also be nutrient and drug interactions if you're taking any kind of medication. So that's something to consider. Also, you have to be pretty careful with certain vitamins because you can overdose on them. You can megadose and get too much, particularly with fat-soluble vitamins and minerals, things that are stored in your tissues that can become toxic. So when you look at recommendations for nutrients, and those are listed in week 2, you'll see that some things have a UL next to them or an upper limit. So that's the most that you would want to take that's not dangerous. And so, you know, be mindful of that. You can overdo it with vitamins. I know sometimes people think that that's impossible, but you can. So, you know, getting most of your nutrients from food and avoiding those single nutrient supplements is a good idea, unless you talk to your doctor. Okay, so the next question was talking about maintaining muscle mass, or basically how best to eat with after physical activity or when you're doing physical activity. So we are going to be discussing physical activity in week 3. You don't need to follow any specific diet per se or drink Gatorade unless you're a bodybuilder, you're running long distances, or you're sweating heavily while doing physical activity for an extended period of time. You know, a lot of people think that they need a lot of extra things, but if you're getting a typical amount of exercise, you really don't. Just if you follow a healthy diet, then you're all good. Having 1 glass of chocolate milk, or having like a glass of milk and a banana, an 8-ounce glass of milk, 1 serving, can help with muscle recovery after strenuous workouts, especially for those doing endurance exercises. So glycogen is the carbohydrate that's stored in your muscles, and especially when you're doing those, well, I guess only when you're doing those endurance activities, you're burning all of that glycogen. And so you want to replace that in your muscles. And so the sugar that's in the chocolate or in the banana is really helpful for replenishing those glycogen stores in your muscles. You know, especially if you want to go long distances, you know, people have those goo things, or, you know, they'll eat snacks while they're running, and it's to keep replenishing those glycogen stores. But even, you know, after doing any specific amount of exercise, you know, that can help. But you may also need it during exercise as well. So then the protein in the milk is very helpful, and then helping with building the muscle fibers. So when you work out, you are damaging your muscle fibers, which seems kind of counterintuitive, but you know, when you're working them, they can become damaged and torn. And you know, you also just need the protein to make them larger when you use them more. So the ideal ratio is carbohydrates to 1 gram of protein for a post-workout snack. Remember, your body can only utilize 1 gram of protein per kilogram, not pound, of body weight for traditional protein functions. So that's for structure, regulation of body tissues and organs, including building up muscle fibers. So if you eat more than that, the rest is just converted into energy or stored as fat. I have had a couple of experiences with people that didn't quite get the per kilogram, and it's 2.2 kilograms per pound. And so they were consuming really high amounts of protein, and it wasn't really helping them, and they were getting hardly any fruits and vegetables. So this is just something to consider, is you don't need any more than that. You don't need to overdo it. Okay, and so on a similar line, as we talked about before, most Americans eat in excess of protein. And so you don't really need to do those protein powders. A lot of people will do those if they're working out, especially if they're doing bodybuilding. Because if you think about it, it makes logical sense, that if you want to build up your muscles and protein builds muscle, you're going to want to eat more, right? But again, your body can only use that 1 gram per kilogram of of protein for those purposes, for building and maintenance of all of your structures. So you don't really need it. But if you're going to use it, I couldn't find any definitive evidence of one supplement being any better than any other one, but whey is absorbed quickly and may help increase muscle mass and strength. So, that may be a good one if you're going to do it, but most people don't really need it, but personal choice. Which brings us to the ketogenic diet. So the ketogenic diet is fairly controversial. The basis of it is to drastically reduce carbohydrates to below 20 grams per day, which is a little more than 1 serving of grains. It's also a high fat and protein type diet. So the theory is, in this state, the body uses glucose stores and then starts breaking down fats. So this diet has been shown in some studies to be effective in initial weight loss. There's less data on the effectiveness long term. Whether it's really helpful going into the future. So if you're on the ketogenic diet for a year, how does that affect your body? And that's a little bit less known. It is high fat, so there is some concern that it could be contributing to higher levels of cholesterol and things, but none of that is really definitive, I would say, yet. One thing to think about, though, in a practical sense, is just that it can be a tough diet for a lot of people to stick with. And for a lot of people, when they go back to carbs, they gain the weight back as quickly as they lost it. So, you may lose 10 pounds within the first week. A lot of that is going to be weight or water weight anyway, but then you may gain it back just as quickly, and you may gain more back. And there is growing evidence that weight cycling, so that process of gaining and losing, is actually harder on your body than being overweight. I haven't seen anything that is harder on your body than being obese, but it may be harder on your body than being overweight. So you do just want to be careful with that. Try to avoid doing those, that great amount of weight cycling. Instead, trying to make it more of a steady, even weight loss. That'll be a lot easier on your body, a lot healthier overall. So besides the weight cycling concerns, there are other potential areas of concern. So the byproduct of ketosis, which is that state that you're putting your body into where you're using your glucose stores and breaking down your fats, is called ketones. And those can build up in the blood, making it more acidic. Your body does control your pH levels very strictly. So this isn't generally a huge concern, but if they do build up, it can lead to a condition called ketoacidosis, which is potentially life-threatening. This is very rare in people that don't have type 1 diabetes because of the way that they process glucose and their insulin sensitivity and things. Well, basically, they don't produce any insulin, but it is possible that could happen. But it pretty much rarely does unless people have diabetes. But it's just something to be careful of, and while you may not reach this exact state, it can't be all that healthy to have this huge levels of acidic byproduct building up in your blood. So, just keep that in mind. Other potential adverse reactions to the diet could include nutrient deficiencies, namely electrolytes like magnesium, potassium. You could put yourself into a hypoglycemic state. Some people will have stomach distress or impaired cognition from being on the diet. So, you know, if you're going to do it, try to do it safely. Try to do it under a doctor's care, if at all humanly possible, and really monitor yourself. Make sure that you're not feeling bad in any way, that you're not getting any of these signs and symptoms that something's wrong. So, and mainly what I saw it used as, that it was proven to be good, or where it was really recommended, was in the treatment of epilepsy, especially in children. So that's generally speaking who doctors would recommend it for in this specific moment in time. It does seem to be like there's a growing body of evidence studying its use with obesity, but it doesn't appear to be definitive at the moment. So there was also a question on vegan diets. And so Dr. Johnson did give a talk that hopefully you all saw on vegetarian diets. It's available under week 2, nutrient needs, macronutrients. So she discussed the benefits and potential concerns of following a vegan or vegetarian diet. So the nutrients that she mentions that may be limited in a vegetarian diet are selenium and zinc. And nuts are a really good source of both of those. So, you know, making sure you have enough nuts in your diet, basically, to make sure that you're getting those vitamins. Vitamin D and calcium can also be low. Leafy greens or dairy are good sources. 2 other nutrients to consider would be iron and B12, both of which are linked to different kinds of anemia. A good vegetarian source of iron would be beans, you know, pinto, kidney, soybeans, lentils. Dark green leafy vegetables like spinach, kale, collards, mustards, things like that. Fortified breakfast cereals. So in the US, almost all of our breakfast cereals are fortified with B vitamins and sometimes with iron. There's also enriched cereal, whole grain breads, things like that. A lot of those are fortified, and they have all these extra vitamins in them. So just making sure that you get enough of those in your diet. It's a particular concern if you're vegetarian or vegan. You just have to be a little bit more careful. If iron is a concern for you, especially if you're on a vegetarian or vegan diet, like I mentioned earlier with our WIC kids, you know, it also is helpful to combine your iron sources with vitamin C in the same meal. So having bell pepper bean salad, you know, spinach with lemon juice, you know, having your iron fortified cereal with berries, things like that can be helpful. Good sources of B12, other than those enriched cereals and things that we talked about, fortified cereals, would be meat, eggs, and dairy in your fortified cereals. Vegetarians may be at risk for B12 deficiency, but it's a much bigger issue for vegans. And so you probably want to take a vitamin if you're a vegan, as recommended by Dr. Johnston. There are no guarantees that you'll lose weight, you know, have clearer skin, have any of the more energy, any of these other positive side effects that a lot of people will say you get when you follow a vegetarian diet. It all depends on the foods you're eating, how much, your physical activity levels, things like that. You know, it's a part of your lifestyle. Just being vegetarian, just not eating meat isn't enough. So you can definitely be an unhealthy vegan, eating mostly processed grains and fake meat products, or an unhealthy vegetarian. When I was in high school, I was a vegetarian and I ate pierogies with tomatoes and black olives and onions and Gardettos and cereal, and that was pretty much it every day. You know, that's not the healthiest way to eat either. So, you know, even if you are vegetarian, make sure that you're following the dietary recommendations. Getting enough fruits and vegetables, you know, can be a little harder to get in enough protein. So making sure that you're really you're really thinking about it and adding in nuts and beans and plenty of those options so that you're doing it in a healthy way. You know, taking care, watching your diet a little bit more, maybe eating more fruits and vegetables, processed foods, things like that, you may get the results that you want. So that weight loss, you know, that clear skin, that more energy, you may get that out of the vegetarian diet. You know, it is definitely lower in fat, typically speaking. You know, and there are a lot of other great health benefits that Dr. Johnston talks about a lot from following a vegetarian diet. It can be a very, very healthy option. There's just a couple of more considerations that you may want to take when you're limiting, you know, whole food groups. You know, it just makes it a little bit harder when you're coming out of a specific tradition of eating. So, you know, if you're used to having the Western diet and you're switching, it can be harder. You know, I know there's plenty of cultures across the world where eating a vegetarian diet is very common and it's very easy to have a balanced diet that way. So it just depends. So those are the topics that I had for today. Let me just do a quick check. See if anyone had any questions that are on here. Nope. All right, so then that's it for today. Thank you all for joining in. I see now that it's a little bit dark, and I apologize for that. It is getting darker out. The sun is setting, and it is no longer bright enough in here. But again, thank you all for watching. I hope you got something out of it. Please look on the choosemyplate.gov site. It's really helpful. It'll really help with finding those serving sizes and getting a good idea of what is a basic healthy diet. I think you guys will like it. So again, thank you and bye-bye.